As the season of autumn approaches, the evenings get cooler and it gets dark earlier and earlier. But on the bright side, with fall comes the fall harvest, featuring fresh and delicious fruits and vegetables. Our guest on this week's Health Talk will discuss some of the good fall harvest crops and the importance of healthy eating. So stay tuned, we're up next. Artificial. Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Mazer. Our topic today is one I'm particularly interested in, healthy fall harvest. And we'll discuss with Bridget Bennett, Norwalk Hospital's oncology dietitian, about healthy eating. It's nice to have you on the show, Bridget.
Thanks for having me
again.
And
you promised to transform my diet by the end of this half hour, end of this segment, is that right?
Absolutely, 100% transformed.
So healthy eating, let me be, I'm one of the people that likes to eat processed sweets, meat with lots of fat, not nicely rippled with fat, and lots of it, chocolate and sugars. How do you make the transition from that to looking forward to a diet of healthy fruits and vegetables?
Okay,
this looks more like a centerpiece arrangement than a dinner.
Than what you might eat. Okay, well the nice part about that is that you can still have your meat and your little bit of sugar and some processed foods within reason, but the idea is that you want to sort of incorporate this a little more. And I didn't even include, there's raspberries and blueberries that are also part of this particular fall harvest. But you know, it's kind of more what you add back in than what you take away. And the meat doesn't have to be the 17-ounce steak. It can be 4 ounces and then have these delicious things around.
Part is that 4 ounces of meat to me looks like sort of a snack on the way to dinner. It's an hors d'oeuvre. But that really, I'm teasing you. But
I understand.
That really, the portion should be relatively small, right?
Right. The American plate, how we used to know it with the starch and the meat and a little bit of vegetables, has really transitioned over the past 10 years, just based on research and data on what's the healthy way, to be including more the meat as sort of the side dish and the vegetables more center stage, and then the whole grains also incorporated in there, so you get just a nicer balance. It's similar to the Mediterranean diet, and that's really where the research is based. And
it's in the Mediterranean, I mean, they're known for good food. The Italians are known for great food, but I guess it's the olive oil and pasta, I guess, within reason.
Within reason, but think about, they have fresh tomatoes all the time. They have great weather too, so they are able to grow all this stuff. And we'll talk about what Connecticut's able to grow in this nice season. But they really do a lot of olive oil, a lot of olives, a lot of plants, a lot of fish, seafood, and not so much of the heavy meat-laden dishes that we're used to.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the beautiful centerpiece that you brought here.
So I figured, because we were talking about Connecticut's fall harvest, I looked in the markets, and we have a little information on where you can find all these foods, but this is all local Connecticut food. I found it at various supermarkets where the stuff looked the best, but these are Connecticut grown beans, Connecticut squash, eggplant.
What is this?
This is an acorn squash.
Oh, that's edible.
This is
I thought it was one of those things that you put next to the pumpkins on your front
porch. That's a gourd,
porch.
and that is not edible. But no, this is actually, every single thing in here is more than edible. We've got a butternut squash, and we have a green cabbage. We have purple cabbage. We have some, what did you ask me? This was collard greens.
Collard greens.
This is great. This is
I
traditionally.
Those are the southern foods, is collard greens.
Well, it is, but it's also just a wonderful food that we grow here, and all this stuff is fresh right now in October. A few things left into November, but mostly this is it. This is what's happening right now, because the summer had a lot of really wonderful produce, and then sort of this is the tail end of it. But this is my favorite part. Sweet potato. We have some sweet potatoes in there. We have this nice little mini baby squash that's super sweet.
I don't know if it's
it's so lovely. And then we have, of course, the tried and true cauliflower.
And we left out the apples.
Well, the apples, I mean,
apples
look.
Apples are so delicious.
You're going to want to get the apples from around here. We grow them all the time.
There is nothing like going out to the orchards locally,
picking
an apple and eating it. I actually do find that a culinary delight.
It is wonderful, especially when it's just crisp right off the tree. It's super.
And so we don't usually think of Connecticut as a farming state, and yet we have all of these goods available here.
We do, and when I was researching a little bit for this segment, and obviously we can get folks out there the information, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of farms across Connecticut that are all growing food that you can purchase. You might have to go to the local farmers market, but some of them sell right on their campuses, and it blew me away. Even in Fairfield County alone, there's at least 4 or 5.
So there are, I think you were telling me before the show, there's a website where people can look up what Connecticut farms are producing locally.
Absolutely.
And what specifically is available.
Correct, and because we're talking about, produce, this is produce, but a lot of them have really nice grass-fed meat, chickens, free-range chickens.
Now you're beginning to sound more.
Okay, we can incorporate all of it. They've got eggs, they've got cheeses made from local goats and sheep, so it's really neat what you can find in your own backyard.
What's the name of, what is that website?
Really? You can put me on the spot. It's the one that's, I don't know what it's NOFA.
Oh, well,
I'm so sorry. It's, there you go. Pick your own.
Okay, we have it up on the screen. So pickyourown.org.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
Can we edit that out?
But no, anybody can check then on that website
it's
and
super.
find out what.
And what it does is it has the farm website and the phone number. You can call them. You can get any sort of information.
Pretty easy to remember. Pickyourown.org.
Pickyourown.org. And it's really neat for the kids too.
Affiliated with that.
Right. No.
At all.
No.
So tell us a little, why is there really is, we were saying there's a really big move farm to table.
Right.
A lot of patients, my medical, a lot of restaurants trying to use locally sourced fruits, vegetables, milk, etc.
Right.
Why is this movement going on? Is it a gimmick or is it real?
No, I don't think it's a gimmick at all. I think it's grassroots, kind of realizing that.
No pun intended.
Right, no pun intended. But flying fresh foods up from South America just seems sort of. It's a little bit of a waste of energy, perhaps, with that food traveling. You've heard like food miles when it has to come from so far away to get to us.
And don't they often pick them before they're completely ripe?
Sure,
and ripening on the, again, you tell me, ripening on the vine, isn't that tastier than ripening in the food truck?
Yes, it is. And it's also sometimes there's certain gases to make them ripe, which seems somewhat artificial. And then so it's twofold. So then it's also about supporting the local economy. Look at all this beautiful stuff. Why do we have to buy apples from Washington? I mean, certainly if we wanted more of a surplus, that's one thing, but let's look in our own backyard first. And I think the chefs are saying, hey, Connecticut grows these really neat little things, and why would we let nutrients dissipate while it gets shipped from California? Why don't we just do it here? Also, I think there's some new things going on with indoor growing, like microgreens and hydroponics. That means we also don't have to ship it from far away. We can grow it indoors, but here.
No, I've certainly noticed in tomatoes in my lifetime, and not to get into, probably know the history of tomatoes far better than I do, but I remember there used to be like 2 weeks in August where you could get these spectacular beefsteak tomatoes, and now they seem to be available during longer spans. I wonder, have they figured out new ways to grow? Corn too. Corn used to have a peak.
Right.
Like
and
2 weeks.
Corn, actually, I didn't put corn in here, but corn is technically still part of the current right now. This October, you've got sweet corn sort of at the very tail end of the season.
But it's gotten so much better than it was before. But you could tell locally grown corn and tomatoes.
You can always tell by the taste. I mean, think about it. I've had tomatoes in the middle of January that they look nice, but they really don't have that taste because they're not. Maybe, I don't know, the growing process is just not the same as when it's really in the sun and the water and the climate and everything else.
So tell us, again, for a non-healthy eater who always has aspired to eat healthy and doesn't, how do you incorporate this rationally in your diet? How do you make that transition? It's not an epiphany. I mean, I know up here that I should eat more like this.
You do know.
But I know from every medical reason, I've read the studies, et cetera. How do you actually do it and be happy with it?
And be happy with it. I think, look, there's only a few things here that I would eat in this state. As you said about the Brussels sprouts, they're so much better when you fry them. Of course they are. And you're still going to maintain a lot of the goodness and the phytonutrients and all the fiber and everything that's good about the particular plant. So, for example, I do not enjoy raw cruciferous vegetables. So what I'll do with this is I'll just go ahead and slice it up, a little bit of olive oil, salt, right in the oven, roast it till it's caramelized almost, and it tastes amazing. Same thing for the cabbage. It literally caramelizes and it ends up tasting sweet. So you kind of have to find the way you like to taste it.
But doesn't caramelize involve frying, or is
it involves a little olive oil, but what's the harm in that?
A little bit of.
I don't mean deep frying. I mean just like caramelize. Like you slather it on either side, and it just gets a nice crisp coating.
And actually, you're saying something embedded in that is moderation for anything. It's okay to have an occasional ice cream cone. a diet of ice cream isn't good for you.
Right, of course. And again, it's, the recommendations are anywhere from 4 to 7 fruits and vegetables in a day. More would obviously be wonderful, but you still need room for your protein and your grains and other things. So, it's more just, like I said, adding a little bit in, having some fruit in your breakfast routine, or if you're having a couple of eggs for breakfast, get some spinach in there. And then, so just little by little, you add a few more smatterings of it. And some people really love a raw tomato, but what if you were to do tomato sauce? Like that's still a plant. That still counts as your vegetable serving.
I know one thing my wife and I did is we started having berries for dessert.
Super.
And it really was, they were delicious. We actually switched off. We used to have a 100-calorie ice cream for dessert, and we decided, well, we'll take the same 100 calories in berries.
And guess what you get? Fiber, phytonutrients, didiese fighters.
Tremendous antioxidants.
It's amazing, right? As opposed to kind of like a processed ice cream.
Right. And I could say I almost enjoyed the berries as much, maybe even a little bit more over time.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. Also, these apples, like say you just don't want to eat an apple plain, but cook it up, slice it up, put it in part of a compote, and it's amazing.
There's a big controversy going on now about a recently published study. I'm ambushing you with this.
Oh no, not the meat study?
The meat study that said that meat really isn't as bad for us as they thought it was. And it was published in a major medical journal, the Annals of Internal Medicine. What, as a professional dietitian, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's unfortunate that we get these mixed messages because, and I think the article said as much, and the people commenting, and it just doesn't do a lot to give you confidence in the studies, because there's always going to be another one coming out. And so as a professional, you say, you can point to this one study, and yet, they used to think that eggs were not good, and then we realized over years and years, it's very hard to look at that stuff in a microscope
as a single
as
study.
its single product, right? Because
I think a lot of people don't understand how science is done, and they think that it's this stepwise, linear accumulation of knowledge, and it really is much more of a jagged line.
It is.
Where it's really, after a period of time, a consensus of studies reach the same conclusion, and it's accepted as fact, and people build on it. But these uncertainties are true of almost every science.
And food studies, I feel like, are particularly hard because you are not in a microscope. You are not in a closed environment.
So they're very difficult to do.
That's right. Very, very hard.
But still, the preponderance of evidence appears to be a plant-based diet is better for you, that it controls your appetite better, that you lowers your cholesterol, et cetera.
There's so many, it's multifactorial because, once again, in a microscope, there's special nutrients in every single one of these foods that, when put together with say a cancer cell, it is literally fighting with it and helping cells repair themselves. So,
and I think something that's really interesting is that when we've tried to say, well, it's this set of vitamins and we put them in a pill, it doesn't work.
It doesn't.
The multivitamins don't compare to eating a food like this.
There's so many things we don't know.
Yes, we don't understand the complex mixture of phytonutrients.
Look how complicated this is. It looks like a brain.
It's
just so complex. It's kind of like this neat
It's actually
food.
quite attractive
It's
as
so
well.
pretty, isn't it?
It's got quite a design.
Yeah, and it seems like the ones that are the most pretty or the most smelly, like a garlic or an onion, do the most internally. It's really fascinating. I find it fascinating.
And I just love red cabbage. Is that, especially when it's pickled, is pickled okay?
Pickled is okay. We realize that fermenting certain foods nowadays, especially with like a kimchi or a tempeh, seems to do something for your microbiota.
And that's a story that we are just touching. They'll have to have you come back to talk about that. But the microbiome, the germs, the bacteria that are living within us seem to play a bigger, we're understanding they play a bigger and bigger role in our health than we're
really understanding probiotics were all the rage, right, within the last, 8-10 years, and now it's prebiotics, which are the things that feed the probiotics. And where is it living? Is it living in the gut, the large intestine, or is it living in the small intestine? And should it be in the small intestine? So it's really, really fascinating.
And that is going to be a topic for another visit, but really one for, I think, people to keep their eye on, because we're expanding this knowledge. Unfortunately, we have more than run out of time. I want to thank my guest, Bridget Bennett, for joining me on Health Talk today, and thank you for watching. Remember to share your questions and your produce and comments with us. Just call Community Relations at Nuvance Health at 203-852-2250.
When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. I'm Paul George, and I want you to learn the signs of a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke. F-A-S-T. Fast.
If you believe that healthy eating is expensive, you are mistaken. You only need to listen to our guest on this week's Health Talk. She will tell us about affordable, healthy eating and demystify the belief that healthy foods cost more. So stay tuned for an interesting show that will help you improve your diet and your life. We're up next. Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Mazer. Today we're going to discuss affordable, healthy eating with Bridget Bennett. She's an oncology dietitian with Norwalk Hospital. Welcome back to Health Talk, Bridget.
Thanks for having me.
It's so nice to have you. This is really what I have to learn more about. This is healthy eating.
This is healthy eating right here in front of us.
So tell us about, I don't see any steak or any cookies or ice cream
Not
here.
today, not right now. Maybe next meal.
So tell us about, because this is not to tease, but we all know that we should be moving more towards plant-based diets, local produce, unprocessed foods, and I think that's really what's represented by what's on the table here.
Right, I tried to incorporate that, and also just I wanted to sort of go with the trend of grain bowls, and so we made a grain bowl. This is basically the finished product, but I wanted to kind of go through and explain.
Yeah, honestly, I'd never heard of grain bowls before tonight. What is a grain bowl?
So a grain bowl is, I mean, it's trendy, but it's a great trend because I feel like it incorporates all this healthy stuff, and it's all in one thing, one bowl. So you can have this as a meal. Usually it's anywhere from 400 to 500 calories, which is a good calorie amount for any average meal, notwithstanding like the male or the female or what your needs are. But so a grain bowl basically,
desires.
Or that. So a grain bowl basically incorporates vegetables. Usually first you would have any sort of leafy greens. I used mesclun greens in this, but this is arugula. I really like that in my grain bowl. Then it would incorporate a grain of choice, so it could be farro or quinoa or any of the other high protein grains.
And these are unprocessed grains, is that
Correct,
right?
correct.
So you wouldn't have white rice in a grain bowl, I guess.
You could. It wouldn't be the end of the world, but mostly you would want something that was less processed, like a wild rice or a brown rice where all the fiber wasn't taking off. And then maximize your vegetables, right? So as many colors as you can think of, those go into the grain bowl as well. And this is just, there is an infinite amount of combinations that you can possibly make, as you can probably understand. I like to add a little bit of the beans as well because that would add the protein. So again, if you are going to believe me, this grain bowl is under $2 and I can kind of itemize everything, and you basically get probably your day's worth of fruits and vegetables. You get an adequate amount of protein from your beans and a multitude of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients to help you fight disease and be healthy.
So this is something we could sit down and have as a main course, and I'm not being facetious.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And also, a lot of people like to add a little crunch at the end. So here's some pumpkin seeds because it's fall. But many people would add chia seeds or nuts into the mix, and that's another healthy fat. And then this is just a simple olive oil dressing with a little bit of vinegar in there and some mustard, just to add a little tang. And so again, healthy fat that goes over the top, and it makes a perfect meal.
Is virgin olive oil better than, is there a difference?
It's really just a matter of taste and what the pressing is. If it's a first pressing, that's extra virgin.
But from a health standpoint, it doesn't.
No, it's all the same amount of fat, and it's just a matter of taste. But I will tell you. So here's the challenge. Maybe you sit down and have this as your main course and see how it satisfies and see how you feel, an hour later, and see if it actually does the trick.
Because from everything I understand, the fiber in these also helps to fill you up in addition to the calories.
Right, the fiber helps to fill you up, but also it's the complex carbohydrates. So for instance, these beans, and again, there's so many choices in beans if you are at the bean aisle, and you can cook them from scratch from a bag, but if you just buy a can and rinse them off. It's complex carbohydrates, so it has lots of fiber, carbohydrates, and protein. So it's this complexity of the bean that really also helps fill you up. Fat can fill you up, but it's not too much of it. And then, yes, the fiber in all the vegetables and the grains also.
There's some good science behind this too, and I actually know the science. I don't have the self-control to live the science, but I know that if you eat processed sugar, glucose, gets into your system very quickly.
Very quickly.
And that spike in blood sugar puts a lot of pressure on your pancreas to produce insulin, and high levels of insulin, which actually lead to weight gain and more appetite.
Right.
So by using non-processed foods like this, where the sugars are released much more slowly and they need to be metabolized, you don't get those spikes in insulin.
And that's exactly
you don't get the appetite.
Yeah, and
you feel fuller longer.
You feel fuller, and you get this nice, slow, steady, rise possibly in the glucose, which is natural, and then the insulin comes in to take it down. But it's never this spiking, this hyperinsulinemia.
Which you get after
Correct.
And
you get that after a lot of things like cereal, sugar cereals and things like that we're eating in the morning, which is also the worst time to eat it.
And I should point out, I've heard this before, but they say colorful foods are good, and this certainly meets that criteria extremely well. I don't know how well people can see it at home, but I've got beautiful red and green, orange in the middle of the table, and the beautiful red berries. It's really looks good.
So let's go through, if you don't mind, what.
Please do.
I will just say, so I shopped at local markets. I shopped at Trader Joe's, ShopRite, Stu Leonard's. Basically, what we have in this local area.
This is legitimate local food.
This
right
is just
here.
regular local markets. Nothing, nothing in particular. I just saw what I thought looked great. So this is probably about 40 cents because it was a bag of arugula, which is $2. So this is a 40-cent little, maybe even less. This is pennies because it's part of this cabbage, which, as you can see, and I have another quarter of it at home. So again, you're talking about cents. This is about 36 cents. I bought the bag of it, and it had 11 servings in it, and so it ended up being 36 cents a serving. So you can see sort of where I'm going with this. Carrot, pennies. These are local Connecticut green beans. These are these guys that I cooked up and again used a smidgen, and I have a lot more at home. Probably cost me about $1 all total, so that's probably about 8 cents worth. The beet is about 30 cents, but I didn't use the whole beet. I got 4 beets for $1.50. So it really makes sense. The beans, each of these I believe is a can of beans, except for the beans that went in there, which is about a half a cup, which that's the serving size, $1. Canned organic beans, $1.
So the whole price of the grain bowl is
probably roughly a little bit less than $2.
So about as much as a quarter pounder.
Actually, and about a quarter of the calories a quarter pounder, and yeah, I knew you were going to say something like that.
Yes, I'm sorry to be so predictable.
And a smidgen of the fat and the cholesterol.
And it really is, and I was being facetious, but I think I reflect so many people with bad habits in our society that this is really, and it really is appetizing. I don't want to be seem silly, but I look at that and it actually looks quite tasty.
It's a good challenge. I bet you would like it. Also, there's
and
a lot of.
It'll stay on my plate longer than a quarter pounder.
That's right.
It'll take more time to eat.
And you have to chew it.
Yeah.
You actually have to chew it more. But there's many stores that also are selling these for $8, $9 a piece because it's convenient. People like that convenience. And some of them can come with tofu on them, or pieces of steak, or pieces of sushi. So,
So you get your protein other than for the beans?
You can get it other than the beans too, but it still kind of follows that my plate rule of more fruits and vegetables, and the protein is a side.
And despite all the controversy there has been, I think most people still agree that a plant-based diet where non-processed plants and vegetables are providing the majority of your calories is still a much healthier way to eat.
Yes, it's absolutely much healthier.
It certainly isn't a less healthy way to eat, so you can't go wrong that way.
You can't go wrong that way. Absolutely true.
And I think it's, from everything I understand, it's easier to control your appetite and your calorie intake that way as well.
And it's really less expensive. It truly is.
So let me ask you, when you have a grain bowl for dinner, and then it's 10 o'clock or 9:30 at night and you get hungry, what do you snack on as a healthy person?
Requested in my house is usually popcorn. So I'll either pop it myself, or I'll buy one of the brands of popcorn, like a Boom Chicka Pop or something like that.
Do you air pop it to get?
I don't. I actually pop it in the pan.
So it actually your popcorn tastes good.
Tastes pretty good, and I do add salt and butter.
You do add salt and butter.
I do add salt and butter.
But again, it's everything in moderation.
And it's a real food.
Yeah.
Yep.
So popcorn is, you know, I don't think, if you let you read the labels, the amount of calories that can pack into a cookie is really extraordinary.
It's extraordinary, yeah.
And-
300 more.
Yeah, or a donut, which I love, but bagels are also incredibly high.
Somehow
I thought because they were boiled, somehow
it boiled away the
they
calories.
or at least,
no.
but no, they really are chock full of.
They're quite carb heavy. Whereas a slice of bread might be 15 grams, a bagel could be upwards to 40 grams.
Is it literally the weight, the amount of?
It's actually the amount of carbohydrates, not the
that's in
weight,
there.
but it does weigh more than bread. Yep.
And so, what other suggestions do you have to move towards a healthy diet, and how do you make that transition without going into shock?
Right. So, I mean, again, I think little by little, if you're adding something, right? So, say you're having a steak for dinner, let's get some lettuce in there. Let's get some sautéed spinach or onions in there. There's no reason why it can't taste nice too.
And you've mentioned sautéed and frying and oil. It sounds like you don't shy away from that.
I don't shy
and I
away
would have
from
thought
oil.
that would be more on the no-no list.
No, I think low fat, I think we've seen historically that low fat isn't really all it was cracked up to be, right? During the 80s, it was all about low fat. It really didn't help, and people gained weight despite the fact that they were eating low fat foods. The fat is actually, especially when it's a good fat, like an olive oil or avocado or something like that, it actually helps you absorb the nutrients in the food better. They've done studies where like the lycopene in tomatoes is better absorbed when it's with olive oil. It's really
And it's
fascinating.
interesting, we were talking again outside the show, that the vitamins that you can buy prepackaged in pills, even though we think it has lycopene and all these good things, don't really have the same effect when we study them clinically, because these foods are so much more complex.
They're so complicated, in there's things that we don't even know about them. We're discovering new phytonutrients every year, and I have confidence in the fact that there's a reason why they come like this, why they grow like this. Whether you cook them or not is kind of a matter of taste, but there's a reason why whole foods are whole foods, and our body recognizes them.
And I would, again, from personal experience, I think berries are a wonderful thing to substitute for a sweet dessert if you're looking for
Absolutely.
that. And they have lots of antioxidants, and they're really, I know they're very healthy for you.
They are a powerhouse, and some of the folks that I work with say, what's the superfood? Is it these? Is it these? And I say that it's all super. It all has something to it. But berries are definitely, a winner because they're just loaded with the anthocyanins and other things that we can't pronounce that are big disease fighters.
And what things should we be eating substantially less of?
So processed food, which is a big term, I would say anything with hundreds of ingredients on the label, especially ones that you don't recognize as food, right? So why would we put that into our bodies? I really don't like food dye. I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't taste like anything. It's probably not good for us. We might figure that out eventually. Sweeteners that are made from chemicals that are made in a chemistry lab, I think maybe are not so great anymore. And again, just foods that you can't recognize, something that your grandmother wouldn't have known what it is probably something we should probably be avoiding.
Let me ask another little tangential, but both my sons, my grown sons, so they're adults, have become quite enamored with the starve yourself, don't eat anything before 6 o'clock in the evening diet.
Okay.
Can you say a few words about that for me? They both lost a lot of weight on
Did
that
they?
too. Yeah.
So you're talking about intermittent fasting?
Yeah, intermittent
So
fasting.
that's kind of a new trend, and it seems to be taking hold. I can't really speak to it because there's not a whole lot of data, but I would say, the idea of not eating after 8, there's 12-hour fasts, there's 15-hour fasts. Some people who are on treatment in our center are fasting for a day before treatment. So there's actually some studies coming up that I think are going to show that it's okay, but as long as it's not harmful, I'm fine with that. I think the body goes through sort of oxidation when we're eating food, and they're discovering that maybe the fasting kind of pulls back on that inflammation and oxidation that's going on, especially with processed foods.
So
we'll see.
Something to keep our eye on.
It's definitely something.
But there's nothing, the more natural way maybe to eat a modified, I should say, controlled portions.
Right.
Whole foods.
I like the idea of eating when you're hungry, not getting too hungry, not getting over full, going slow, chewing. There's a lot
Not stuffing yourself.
There's a lot of things we can do.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Unfortunately for you, I'm going to eat the food when we're done. I want to thank my guest, Bridget Bennett, for joining us on Health Talk today. And I want to thank you for watching. Remember to share your comments with us. by calling Community Relations at New Vance Health. That's 203-852-2250. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.